Good. I've got a compact with you today, and that is that my presentations are 20 slides, 16 slides in 20 minutes. That's 1.15 minutes or thereabouts per slide, and I hope to take that back so as to bring you all on time, on programme, as best I can. It's good to give you a bit of context to this presentation, and some of the context is that data is predominantly 2014, some of it is 2013. That's because of a lag, obviously. And going back on, Peter Stafford was talking about the 2020 strategy and Forfos, but the 2020 strategy deals predominantly with the domestic market and demand, and one of the big drivers within it is demand in the domestic market. He was talking about joined up thinking, and I'd like to throw the premise at you that maybe Enterprise Ireland and its response to the construction industry from 2007 onwards through now is some of the joined up thinking that he was wondering was there. One of the other small pieces is that if you're to look at DKM and Euroconstruct and the way they break up the construction industry and the way they report it, and Michael Dahl, interestingly enough, they obviously use slightly different metrics or styles of reporting. The DKM Euroconstruct used commercial, residential, industrial and infrastructure as the four main divisions, and predominantly commercial and residential and infrastructure are domestic market activities, whereas industrial is a domestic market but is also an export market. So if that gives you some context to where we are, hopefully we can move on now. And up comes the next slide. Okay, so the content today is about the Irish construction industry, obviously, and it's about the Irish economy as well, and the Irish economy as a major piece, and the construction industry within it. Hopefully I'll also try and deal within the next 40 seconds on this one, Enterprise Ireland, its clients and its services. Again, starting just explaining that Enterprise Ireland's response has been really around, generally if you're looking for a moniker or something to hit on, it would be around the competitive advantage of nations. And one of the bits that we are very good at is in the industrial sector, is the construction of specific facilities. If you look at it of ourselves, benchmarking ourselves, we can look at the Irish economy there and how we rank. Well, we rank as competitive, we rank as globalised, and I'll go through these. We rank as productive, and we're pro-business. Ireland's recovery 2008 to 2014 is predominantly what I'll deal with. But in 2006, according to Peter Stafford, we were 25% of GNP, falling to 7% of GNP in the construction industry in 2011, and rising then to 9.8, which is accepted as a reasonable benchmark figure. And across that is the importance of exports, which is the second last item there. And export excellence is what I suppose you'd like to say Enterprise Ireland does, but that's what I'd throw at you as an idea. The sort of companies we're talking about generally are those in the industrial sector, companies like PM Group, I think I see Dave Murphy down there in the audience, DPS, John Paul, Sisk, Ardmac, Kilsaran, Ecosem, Cubis, Kingspan. So there's a huge range of companies, some multinational, some SMEs. So how do we rank? And I'll go fast through this, but really you're looking at FDI and local. And FDI is the foreign direct investment piece, and local is the local, obviously. So we're the second largest exporter of software in the world, and driving that as a data industry, or part of that as a data industry. And if you're to go on a global market for the construction of data centres, you would see that Ireland ranks very high. For example, 2 months ago, I was up in Helsinki with a group of Irish companies, and they were there to help the Finnish market develop in data centres, etc. So Ireland has a space in data centres based on FDI and based on our experience of the Irish construction industry working within the economy and delivering for that economy. Second largest in the world for probiotic research, and third for immunology research. Well, that feeds out of pharma and it feeds into pharma. Irish companies, again, looking at companies like PM Group and DPS and people like that are building in Wavre and Poors and Giel in Belgium. world-class sites based on having built world-class sites here, and based on them having international capacity to execute facilities, not just in Belgium but in Sweden and in China and India and various other countries. If you look at the next two items, sixth largest exporter of beef in the world and 20 at the world's infant formula. That's the food industry, and we all know that food is a huge part of our export story and a huge part of what we do as a nation. But of course within that you've got, I noticed they don't mention the drinks industry, which is a huge producer for this economy and also into the global economy. So some pictures emerging. Ireland is a competitive place. Ireland benchmarks itself, and it's one of the things we like to do, and it's one of the things we should do, and it's one of the things that Enterprise Ireland certainly tries to get its clients to do. Benchmark yourself. Look at your competition in a foreign market. Set yourself against that competition and see how you manage yourself and how you will be managed. Looking at Irish labour costs falling below the euro area in 2011, we're 11th in the EU, below such countries as Luxembourg, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands and Austria. These metrics just give you a position and a strength where Irish companies, for example in Scandinavia, in certain parts of the construction industry, are very competitive and have managed to win quite an awful lot of work. I thought when I was seeing my own photograph that I was running over time. I think I'm still within the 1 minute per slide. Production. All these slides will be up on the internet and available, so I won't labour them, but you're just looking there at Ireland lying below Luxembourg and Norway in terms of productivity. And that's one of the big things. So it doesn't matter how much you're paying people, it doesn't matter how much you're doing things. When people are productive, the end result is probably far more important. I remember going to a presentation in Genzyme in Waterford. It took 36 months from design to build to commissioning and opening. It cost something like 380 million or thereabouts. It employed 180 people. But the big figure was it was exporting 2.1 billion per annum. So at those sort of figures, it doesn't really matter. You know, the big driver was the exports. Ireland is globalised, and again, a number of metrics there for you. Ranked third, the most globalised economy in terms of GDP. The most globalised nation in the Western world, and in terms of our openness to trade, our movement of capital and our exchange of technology and ideas. All of those end up in probably more the quality end of the discussion when you're trying to do business overseas, but those are the bits of the story that maybe, and possibly, and they do, people like the IDA use as the story to bring people into Ireland. But when going onto a global stage, those are the stories that are. We've done it here with these metrics, and we can do it for you and your clients and your companies. This is one of the pieces where we've got 2013 data. But you know, the bottom line here is that is our economy, but within that economy is the construction economy. It's the construction economy, and particularly an industrial construction economy that does most of the exporting. And out of that comes a construction figure in terms of exporting at 2.5 billion in total. Products about 1 billion and services about 1.5 billion. As you can see there, construction and consumer in 2003 were 7.3% up on the previous year. So the competitive advantages are in the area of power, data, pharma, mining, civil engineering, and building of high-value buildings like healthcare buildings, etc. So those are the sort of areas where it all happens. Enterprise Ireland clients, and this is where I get probably a little bit more specific. A typical client at the lowest level will be between 1 million and 10 employees in terms of turnover and employees, demonstrate a tangible ability to export, creating jobs in Ireland, and will have a net benefit to Ireland by formula. Mainly SME clients. And from that comes, you know, the very large companies who are out there very successfully doing business in the industrial sector. Jones, Dornan, Kirby, Mercury, as I mentioned, PM, Sisk, John Paul, Bennett's, Coffees, Roadbridge, KN Networks, all of those sort of companies. But within those come the food chains or the supply chains, and the supply chains give us the great story about SME type clients. And I look at one very small area which has emerged probably in the past 4 or 5 years, maybe 7 years, companies like who are working on the network in Ireland, companies like TLI, H&MV, Liscallum, MTM and Gaeltech. Those companies are now up, running in Ireland and also working abroad and working very successfully abroad. And I suppose the interesting thing about them all is that they don't see themselves competing with each other. They see themselves competing in a much larger pie where they can find their own place. And that brings me nicely to what is your own place and what do I do for people. Okay, so we categorise clients. We have HPSU, scaling, established clients is the bit I'll deal with in red there. Food, construction, and construction is our piece, and we have construction products and we have construction services. It's a funnel effect, and that's really what we're doing. We're working on a funnel with people, and we have the potential exporters as well. So that's sort of the general, how we run our business or how it works. I suppose one of the interesting comparisons you would have is that we have 32 offices overseas with 150 staff, and the Department of Foreign Affairs in Africa alone has 380 people. So I suppose that gives you an idea of what we do on a small enough budget. So what is the Enterprise Ireland suite of services, and how do we try and get people into a place where they will be competitive abroad or where they can succeed? Well, competitiveness is one thing, and we have services in e-commerce, in lean, in BIM, building information management, strategic marketing and review, and a green offer for green and eco-friendly services. In CMD, which is Continuous Management Development, we have a signature programme called Leadership for Growth, which works with the leaders of large companies. We have Management for Growth, and just to go back to Leadership for Growth, we've had 2 of those specifically for the construction industry, and specifically over a period of 2008 to 2011. And that brought just about 60 chief executives of the construction industry through, and the vast majority of them are the companies that I've mentioned to date of being successful abroad. Management for Growth is a current programme. We work with small teams within SME type companies and building them into a competitive position in a global marketplace. It's all about strategy and it's all about execution of that strategy. Platform for Growth, ISP, and ISP Excel, Excel at Export Selling, Graduates for International Growth. They're all management tools and they're all educational tools, and they're all really around configuring your business and getting your business into a sales mode overseas. Another of our offers is our overseas offices. The vast majority hopefully will know what they are and how they work. Financial, we have banking relationships, we have finance for growth, we have equity, and we have grant. In other words, we assist companies at various levels, depending on their needs and depending on a need to motivate a company into a particular direction. And research and innovation, academia interface, Horizon 2020, and information vouchers, etc. So, what do we do in business training? There's what we do in business training. There's where we start our other funnel effect of bringing down in the areas of what is the strategy, what is the organisation, what is the HR component of that, what are the competencies of the people to do exactly what you're asking them to do, how are you going to market and sell, how are you going to finance that business, what are the legal and economic constraints or advantages you will have. And that's the sort of area that CMD and those training provide. The elements are very different. There's the differentiation between providers, a value proposition. It's amazing how many companies or how many clients of ours, as they come in, say, oh, my value proposition is X or Y, and by the time they've gone through a process, it's a very structured process. Some people might even say it's a very Americanized process. but it is a process, and when they come out the far end, they definitely have a value proposition. They know what it is, and they can communicate that to clients, and that is really the difference. How to do marketing, what is marketing, how to do selling, how to sell, it's a system. It's less based on personality and more based on a style of research and routine, and a proper and effective way of dealing with people, giving them a solution to their problem. Routes to market and target markets and specialisation. Those are all the elements of the education within the education that we provide. I said I'd come back to you on what our overseas offices do. 32 offices covering 70 markets. We do trade missions, we do inward buyer visits, we do market study visits, and we do one-to-one with what we call high engagement clients. That is a scaling process. That is where we say certain clients can grow exponentially, and we give them an additional piece of effort and an additional piece of assistance to get there. It's usually in the training area. The next slide is a return to an earlier slide, because my compact with you is that I would try and get through these slides quickly, and I would try and show you, possibly set out a roadmap of how we got there, or how we were going to get there, or certainly how Enterprise Ireland has tried to get its clients in that journey between 2007 and 2015. And so that's a repeat of an earlier slide to try and reinforce that thought, or that concept within you. Okay, to conclude, companies are generally capable and competitive in specific areas. Opportunities exist in global industries and markets. About 3 years ago, I remember talking to some clients about the power industry, and they were all talking about the UK, for example, most interesting market, I'm sure, for power. But the one that came up was that in South America that year alone, they were going to spend something like 20 billion on power stations. And the only real impediment there, I suppose one of them would be obviously ease of business indices, but the other was particularly learning either Spanish or Portuguese. I don't mean in language, I mean in culture. Opportunities exist in global industries and markets. When you go out into a global market, you must look an awful lot broader than the existing market you've had in Ireland and the aspirations you might have had in it. And it's really about specialising and researching and understanding within those markets to get there. Matching capability with industries, certainly it's one of the things we have done as an organisation, particularly in this area, because if you look at it, we took a quarter of the Irish construction industry, which is the industrial construction, and we matched capability in those companies to industries and to overseas activities. One of the issues we often have in a small market will be execution within pipelines, and pipelines, or business development pipelines, are very important. Anyone who's in the business, an accountant for example, in the business of buying and selling companies and advising companies about their purchase and sale will always look, what's the pipeline? It's probably one of the key issues. What is the likelihood of that pipeline becoming a reality? What is the security behind all of that marketing and all of that selling? Or is there any security, or has there been any activity? Those are the questions. And I suppose in the end also it's about delivery for clients. It's about delivering results for clients so as they'll hire you again. And when you think of companies that have worked here on the various iterations of Plant for example, Pfizer, and then you see that they have worked with Pfizer in Sweden and, or for that matter, Genzyme in Ireland and Genzyme over in Benelux countries, or Janssen Pharmaceuticals, or any of these big companies, or the data centre companies. That's what it is, it's about deliver. And if you can deliver in Ireland, you can deliver globally, because we are a competitive nation and because we are a productive nation. So, have I got back enough time for you? Thank you.